Hey, welcome back to PewTube. I'm Kevin Inoue with Fight Designer LLC. We had some questions come up not too long ago about blank firing rifles. So I thought I'd go ahead and address that this week with today's video. Unfortunately, there's really not a lot of options. If you go back, I think it was early 80s, apparently there was a company called Jaeger, I think it was, that was making some blank firing M16s and AK-47s. Now, I've seen some pictures of them, I haven't seen video, and I've never seen one in person. And from what I've heard, they were pretty crappy. They were not reliable, they didn't look great. But, you know, at the moment, we really don't have much. Now, you can get blank firing adapters for real rifles. You can use blanks in bolt action or lever action rifles, and they'll cycle fine. But if you're looking for purpose-made blank firing rifles, there's really only one that's commonly available right now. So I'm going to spend most of the time talking about that. But before we do, other options. There are some cap firing shell ejecting model gun rifles, especially in the more tactical styles. The AR-15 M4s. There's some in my video previously about the AR-15, M16, M4 options. Those use the 7mm caps and spit out casings. I know Hudson makes an AK-47 that's the same type, but those tend to be kind of fragile. They look great, but they're fragile and they jam a lot and they're rare. Most of them are getting kind of old, a lot of their plastic parts and things like that, and the casings, you got to be able to reuse those, and as those start to wear out, you got to replace the O-rings and the brass starts to get chewed up on the rim. I expect those are going to be more and more going away from production props and into collector's items, unfortunately. I know I haven't gotten mine out now in years or used any of them for anything, which is kind of sad because it's like, you know, but they're special, you want to save them for the right thing. You don't want to use them in live theater, they're just not sturdy or reliable enough for a long run like that. Now there's, you know, in terms of black powder muskets, I talked about that in a previous video as well. You can use real black powder like reenactors do, but in indoor theaters that's generally not an option. There's all sorts of safety issues. I actually just sold my two blank firing pistols that were in that earlier video. Overnighted them down to opera production down in Georgia because they were in a bit of a pinch and needed something right away. So I'm hoping I can at some point replace those with some new ones from Benaya or somewhere else, figure out another solution for that. I still have the longer musket though of those. But that is one solution, which is to put a blank firing revolver usually inside another prop that sort of gives it a housing, kind of like those Eckel Asi ones. So this would be the most common one of those that most people know. It's not really a rifle, but you can do the same thing with a rifle. So this particular one is a extended magazine in. This particular one is made to look like an Uzi, but they obviously took some liberties and changed it around a bit. And it's, you know, an Uzi's not actually that common a gun in entertainment anymore anyway. It's a little bit dated. In the 80s it was all about the Uzis. But now they've kind of slapped on some tactical rails and this forward grip. You can get now a folding stock for it as well. You can get these in front vent, which is better, or top vent, which has this weird kind of chimney thing here that vents actually right where this rail is. So if you put anything on the rail, it'll blow that off, so don't do that. I think these kind of look like junk even when you take the orange tip off. You know, I thought about altering some of these, maybe cutting off this grip so it looks a little more like an Uzi. But the rails are just weird. It doesn't have a charging handle on the top like a real Uzi does. It's really a Beretta 92 style Eccles Jackal with extended release kind of screwed onto the slide and then this housing put on it so that you can still operate it. But it's, here we go, put on fire. One of the things you can't get at is the slide release. There's no extension to make the slide release accessible outside the housing. So if you want to release the slide, you actually have to take the magazine out to be able to do that, unfortunately. So there's a couple things like this. There's a company called Blow that makes a sort of vaguely MP5 version of the same thing. And those use the 9mm PAK blanks, which are also too loud for most of our indoor theater spaces. So yeah, you know, not ideal. Weapons of choice. Yes, in California. Used to have a bunch of rifles where they kind of made a custom housing around it to make it look like an AK-47 or whatever. A friend of mine out in Chicago shared a video of one of those, and it was the spray from the top venting blank gun just vented straight back down into the actor's hand, so not something they felt safe using or handing to an actor. I think Benai did a better job with his musket, but you know, if you have a qualified enough prop shop, that's maybe something you can consider. But for the moment, all we've got is these Winchester lever action Western rifle by Bruni. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about these. Bruni is, if you've heard me in any of my previous videos, this is their Mod 1894, made it look like a Winchester lever action. Bruni is not my favorite blank gun maker. I have said this before, I don't like their 1911s at all. In general, their build quality isn't as good, but they're the only ones who do this. So there's definitely a place for these. There's a use for these if you're doing any get you gun or whatever. And you know, there's still hunters who use lever action, so there are times when you can use it for other stuff. But there's some things that go wrong with these, and so I think it's important to know whether you're renting these from me, whether you're renting them from someone else, whether you're buying them. Here's some important things to know about these. Now, things that can go wrong. Let's start there. There is this top cover plate here that is very easy to lose, and you can see this one's actually taped on. Let me find. I've got like 5 or 6 of these, and I got one that isn't taped on. There we go. So it still has some bubble wrap from when I moved. So this plate here. Unfortunately, if this thing can slide forward, it's not really well attached, and if it does, this just lifts out, which makes it really easy to lose this piece. And then there's also this little sight adjustment thing. And this style, it's just a little wedge that can make this move up or down. Now, we don't really need sights for our blank guns, but just cosmetically, it's nice not to lose that, and these are really easy to lose, because it's kind of like the AK-47 receiver covers. Just slides in and then tucks under. But the only thing holding it is the tension of this screw through here, which is not very much, especially as these start to get old. These bands can wiggle around. So, really easy to lose this wedge, really easy to lose this whole panel. Good news is, for the most part, it's still entirely usable even without that. You know, I'd buy that as a lever action rifle, and most people aren't going to know anything's missing just looking at that. So that's one thing that can go wrong. Number two thing that can go, oh, there's some chipped wood on this one as well. Number two thing that can go wrong. This is a top vent model, which means the barrel is plugged, but it's plugged really far down. The vent is right here. So that's where all the expanding gases and things need to be able to vent from that 8mm blank. Now the problem is that these bands also move around. Where's my loose one here? There we go, like this. Which can create potentially a huge safety issue, because if this is our only vent hole for that blank, if this slides up right there, it can completely cover that vent hole. And now what you have, just slid right back down. Anyway, if that did stay there and get stuck there, jam this back down, what you'd have is kind of a bomb. I mean, it's a really lame, weak bomb because it's an 8mm round down here. It's got some room to expand. I'm not going to say that it would explode in your hands, but I'm also not going to guarantee that it wouldn't. So it's kind of a pain to clean to get all the way down there and vent that out, but it's also really super important that you can make sure that that stays clear. So it's not just that you can have obstructions from the inside, like with any blank gun, but it's that this band can slide down and cover the whole damn thing up. That could cause serious problems. So that's number two on the things that can go wrong with this. To which I'm going to add number three. If you watched my 1911 video, I think it was like my third or fourth one, one of the issues that I had with those is that the sear often oh, hey, this one's missing that little wedge, just like I was telling you about. Again, no one's going to know that's missing just looking at it on stage, but I know, and it's annoying. But one of the things I didn't like about their 1911s is they sometimes have sear issues. So you rack the slide and the hammer doesn't stay back. You can still manually cock it back and fire it, but it doesn't work like it's supposed to. That happens with some of these as well. So that seems to be just something about the quality of metal they're using or their construction methods. I don't know. But when this goes back, when you pull that lever back, this is essentially like the slide on a semi-automatic, and it's supposed to cock that hammer back. Some of these, it no longer does that. You can still cock it by hand, you can still fire it. So here, let me put this in front of something pale like my face so you can actually see what's going on. So as that goes back, you've got this part coming in here, but then the hammer just follows it instead of going back like it's supposed to. On one that's working properly, that hammer stays back so it's ready to fire each time you do that. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with lever action rifles, this is a tube magazine, which is a little different from what you'd have on modern magazines. And I'm discovering here that I have a lot less 8mm blanks than I have 9mm lying around, because I tend to prefer the 9mm guns. They tend to be better built. Anyway, you load this through this little gate here. Aim the blank forward. So the green part is the front. Slide that forward, push in. Kind of goes down this little ramp. And it's feeding into this tube here, right? So how many we can fit now? I'll be honest, I haven't used these in a while. I don't even remember what the capacity is. That's 5. I think it might be 8. Let's see. Oops, it's sticking a little bit now. Is that when we're at it? Is it just 5-round capacity? Could be. So when we rack this, it's going to take one out of that tube magazine, and hopefully, oh, that's jamming up. Add to the list of things that can go wrong here. That round fell back farther than it's supposed to, and it's now jammed into the side of the bolt. And this is why we test things here before we send them out on a rental gig. There seems to be a little bit of a grease and gunk that kind of got in there and might have interfered with the action. Let's see if it'll cycle the rest. There we go. That's how it's supposed to go. So now we got one in the chamber. I'm going to go ahead and decock it. See if I can get these back in. I don't know if that was full or if it's just jams, because one of the other things that can go wrong in loading these is this little gate will kind of hit the round and then it won't open enough to push more in. Let's see if you can get a view of the mechanism here. I'll try and hold this up to the camera a little closer. There we go. Now it's loading in. These are finicky. Hopefully you will never have a character who ever actually has to load these on stage, because it's a pain in the butt. Any backstage crew can take the time to get it right. Oh, there we go. It can do more than 5. Well, that's 12. Now the ramp's sticking a little bit. So I don't know if it could take more or not. But I'm going to stop there for now. Honestly, I'd never want to load more than 12 rounds in one of these anyway. So let me just show you how this action works. You're going to eject out the front here, which means it's going to go flying kind of towards the camera and I might lose it. There we go. If you go a little slower, you can see it pulls out that round. Pops this out the top. The next one is coming in here. Goes forward and gets chambered. Hammer is cocked, firing pin's in here. So, there is also no real way to unload these other than cycling through the action. So that's one reason I said I'd never want to actually load more than 10 in this anyway. Just because I don't want to have to sit here doing this too long to unload them. Or chase them across the floor when they go flying if I cycle it with a little bit more action, speed. There we go. So there's one of the downsides of a tube magazine, is you can't eject the rounds or even visually check it very easily. There we go. Now I can see the follower in there and I know that's empty. So yeah, it can hold a lot, but it's also going to jam some. It seems like a quality control issue, because some of them the hammer's been working fine, some of them it's not, but it is possible that as this part wears down with too much use that it's not going to pull it back enough to cock it all the time. So, just a quick review. Yeah, in addition to kind of like some of the just general build quality issues and the looseness on some things here, that top panel with the rear sight is going to fall off half the time. If you want to just cheat and put a little black electrical tape on it and hold it on during the run of your show, I certainly don't mind. Or dress it up with a piece of leather or something like that, try and make it look a little bit more like, look, it's a cowboy gun. But you really got to watch for these bands as well, because they can slide forward. You got to make sure that this vent is in a safe direction and is not covered up by this sliding band here. You may have to cock it by hand if it comes to that. If it does jam, don't try and fix it on stage. Find some other plan B where you can just shout bang or something and have one of your stagehands fix it later, when they can take their time and pull out a good pair of pliers and make it work right. On a somewhat related note, I mentioned I didn't have a whole ton of 8mm blanks left, so I was digging through my stash. One question that's come up also is, can blanks go bad? Can ammunition go bad? One of the reasons why they tend to use non-ferrous casings, like brass, is it doesn't rust. It can tarnish a little bit, but it's not really going to rust. But you can also get, I found I had these really old 8mm blanks in the bottom of one of my boxes. And you can tell I had one brass one left from something else that I stuck in there. It's, you know, a little brown, but okay. But some of these were steel cased. You can see that rust? That doesn't look good. Now, would that be a functional issue? I don't know. It's certainly going to be more likely to jam just because it's not as smooth anymore. I can't tell if the seal with the primer is still good. So I don't know for sure if this is going to still fire. But tell you what, why don't I find out, and we'll use that to show volume levels and vent with this as well. So we'll test these old blanks and we'll see what happens. Alright, so I'm using this one with the sear issues just because I don't mind wearing it out as much, and I'm using my junky old blanks because I wouldn't want to send those out to a client anyway. So let's see what happens. I'll go ahead and load up a couple of these. Oh, and since people have been asking about volume levels, I'll go ahead and, yeah, it does take a little bit, but it does go in. I'll go ahead and load up my, my little decibel meter thing as well, so we can check the levels on this. And let's see what happens. Let me make sure that you can see the end of the barrel. We'll go this way. I'll have to manually cock it. Still worked. Dirty as all hell, but it worked. Alright, I got one more in there. Verdict is, rusty old blanks will still fire. That maxed out at 102.9 decibels, if you can see that. Again, I would not trust these with an audience, but if you want to use them for workshops, if you have something like this kicking around the back of your scene shop and you want to do it for workshops or doing paper tests or things like that. Now, paper tests and volume tests ultimately do need to do at least some with the blanks you're going to be using in your show, because otherwise that could change things. But this at least makes lets you know that the prop is working and will fire. And hopefully you got good enough view there that you can see where it vents and how much. It's interesting. This does jump a little bit almost down just because the vent is so far at the end of this lever and going up. It's kind of like a compensator with no actual recoil. But that's the same general principle that a firearms compensator would use, of venting some of the gases up towards the end of the barrel to help prevent muzzle rise. But in this case, there's nothing to make muzzle rise, so it actually might have jumped down a little bit. Curious, I'll look at the footage and see how that goes. And then to clean this out, what I'm going to do is open the action, and I'll just spray a bunch of WD-40 down there until it's starting to come out clean. There's really no way to get a brush down this, unfortunately, because of the plugged barrel and the lack of access in the back here. Well, which is another reason why these are just, not going to be your highest quality, best, longest lasting props. So that's our blank firing rifle. Like I said, I got a few of these in stock. They do fill a niche that is needed. They're not the highest quality, but they're all we got. So it's worth knowing about what's out there in the industry. Until next time, thanks for watching, and link, subscribe, like, comment, email, and I hope these are useful to you. See you next time.